I never thought a single midnight phone call could rearrange the furniture of my heart. But that night, when the house was quiet and the clock sounded louder than breath, my grandson's name lit up my screen, and what he told me turned an ordinary night into a memory I still carry like a folded letter in my pocket. It wasn't dramatic in the way movies are. It was quieter, truer, and it asked me to listen with more than my ears. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. The call came at 12:03 a.m. I remember because the red digits on my bedside clock felt like a small alarm, the kind that nudges you rather than shouts. I was wrapped in the old blue quilt my mother stitched years ago. It seemed softened by time. Rain drummed a patient rhythm on the balcony rail, and the refrigerator in the kitchen hummed like a faraway boat engine. When the phone buzzed, I sat up too quickly, as if the sound were a ripple I needed to catch before it disappeared. "Grandma." His voice was hushed and careful, like he was stepping into a dark room and didn't want to knock anything over. "Are you awake?" "At my age," I whispered back, "sleep is a cat that comes when it wants." I switched on the lamp. The light made a warm circle on the nightstand, highlighting the reading glasses I'd abandoned earlier and the postcard of an Illinois cornfield I keep tucked under the clock. He breathed out, a thin, fluttering sound. I could picture him in his small apartment, lamplight on, blinds tilted half closed, a stack of class notes, and a mug with a spoon resting like a compass. He is 20, all bones and promise, and late-night worries. We have an understanding. If the sky is dark and something is heavy, he can call me. "What's the matter, love?" I asked. The endearment slipped out the way it always does, natural as pouring tea. I don't know where to start," he said. "Everything feels like it's happening at once. School, work, Dad's expectations, my own. It's like I'm carrying boxes I can't set down." I listened. The rain agreed, tapping gently. From somewhere down the block, a dog shook its collar and settled again. I told him to take his time. My father used to say that rushing through a story breaks it, and I've learned he was right. He started with the small things, the lost bus pass, the paper due, the hours at the cafe stretching long. Then the larger shapes emerged, the fear of disappointing people he loves, the ache of not knowing if the path he'd chosen still belonged to him. While he spoke, I could hear the watery echo of his apartment pipes and the tiny squeak of his chair, and those sounds made him feel close enough to touch. "Grandma, I need to tell you something," he said finally. "It might make you think differently about me." I felt my hand tighten around the phone, not with dread, but with attention. "I'm listening," I said. "That won't change." He paused long enough that I could count the beats between us. 5, maybe 6. "I'm thinking about changing my major," he said, "and quitting the cafe. I want to apply for the community arts program downtown. I've been sketching at night. It's the only time I feel like I can breathe. But I'm scared Dad will say I'm throwing away my future. And I don't want to let you down." The relief that filled me was unexpected and immediate, like opening a window you didn't realize was painted shut. Tears came before words did. Not from sadness. No, from the tenderness of being trusted with the first fragile shape of a dream. I didn't let him hear the tears at first. I breathed slow, steady, as if calming a bird cupped in my hands. "Sweetheart," I said, "you didn't call an accountant, you called your grandmother. My job is not to tally your choices. My job is to keep the porch light on and the kettle warm while you try the door. If a room gives you air, that matters. That's not throwing anything away." That's finding the handle." He drew in a shaky breath. I could picture his shoulders, which so often ride up to his ears, lowering by an inch. "But what if I fail?" he asked, and I heard a child again, the one who brought me dandelion crowns and asked if storms could crack the sky. "Then you fail forward," I said. "We clean the skinned knee, and you try again. Do you know how many things I've started late? I learned to drive when I was 49. I planted a garden on hard clay and got tomatoes anyway. I remarried at 52. Life is full of late doors that still open." The words surprised me even as I said them, because they pulled old rooms back into the present. The steering wheel under my new learner's hands, the first red blush on a stubborn tomato, the quiet vows in a courthouse that smelled faintly of lemon and dust. I realized I was offering him my own map, messy, crossed out, dotted with detours that still led somewhere kind. He didn't respond right away. The rain softened to a whisper, and the refrigerator's hum retreated. In the pause, I remembered a drawing he made when he was 7. Our house with a lopsided tree, 2 figures holding hands, one with big round glasses. He had titled it Safe. I kept it on my fridge for years until the sun bleached the edges. "Grandma?" His voice was steadier. "Can I tell you what I'm most afraid of?" "Yes," I said, and I meant it with my whole chest. "I'm afraid that if I choose this, people will think I'm choosing against them." That's when the tears finally escaped without asking my permission. They slid warm and honest, not from hurt, but from recognition, of the way love sometimes looks like a ledger when it should look like a lantern. I wiped them with the heel of my hand and let him hear my breath, the human sign of presence that travels better than any sentence. "Love isn't a vote you cast once," I told him. "It's a porch light you leave on. Choosing air for your lungs isn't choosing against anyone. It's choosing life, and that lets you give more, not less." He laughed a little, the way you do when the knot begins to loosen. "You always have a porch image," he said. "I can see it. The light, the kettle." "Well," I said, smiling at the sound of his smile, "then you know where to find me." We sat in the soft hush of after midnight for a few seconds more. He told me about a sketch he'd made of a man waiting at a bus stop, the way the shoulders sloped under an inexpensive coat, the hopeful tilt of the chin toward approaching headlights. I told him I wanted to see it. He promised to send a picture in the morning. "Thank you for picking up," he said at last. "I know it's late." "It's only late if the conversation doesn't matter," I said. "This one matters." When we hung up, the room felt both lighter and more real, as if the lamp's small circle had grown. I lay back under the blue quilt and stared at the ceiling where a faint rectangle of streetlight hovered. I thought about the strange mercy of timing, the way a midnight call can become a doorway, and about how sometimes the young don't need our answers so much as our listening, a place where their own answers can climb out of the dark and stand upright. I closed my eyes with a damp face and a steady heart, already waiting for morning, already planning what to text him first. "I'm proud of you for telling the truth of your breath." After that first call, sleep didn't come easy. I drifted in and out, the quilt pulled up to my chin, listening to the fading rain. My heart carried the weight of his words like a lantern lit in a long hallway. By morning, the world outside my window looked washed clean. The air was brisk, the kind that makes you pull your robe tighter, and the smell of wet earth drifted in through the cracked window. I poured myself a cup of coffee, strong and dark, and sat at the kitchen table waiting for his promised picture. When my phone buzzed, I reached for it like a letter from an old friend. It was the sketch. A man at a bus stop, just as he described. The lines were quick but alive, catching a quiet kind of dignity in the slump of shoulders and the hopeful tilt of a chin toward headlights. It wasn't perfect. Some lines wavered, the shading was rough, but that imperfection made it real. I found myself leaning in, wanting to trace the pencil strokes, as if by doing so I could enter his world for a moment. I sent back a message. You didn't just draw a man. You drew his waiting. That's harder to do. That's art. He replied almost instantly. You really think so? Or are you just saying that because you're my grandma? I laughed, a sound that startled me in the quiet kitchen. The steam from the mug fogged my glasses. I wrote back, grandmothers are experts in cookies and hugs. For truth, you'll have to trust your own eyes. Look at it again. What do you see? There was no answer for a while, and in that space I remembered my own beginnings, the first time I baked bread without help, the crust uneven, the middle too soft, but the smell filling the house so completely I couldn't stop smiling. Nobody could take that moment from me. Around noon, my phone rang. He didn't bother with small talk this time. Grandma, he said, his voice stronger. I stared at that sketch for an hour. You were right. I saw things I didn't even know I'd drawn. The man's shoes, how they lean outward, like they've carried him far. The coat, a size too big, but he's standing proud anyway. I don't know how it happened. It just came out of me. That's how truth works, I told him. It sneaks in through your hands when your head isn't guarding the door. He went quiet again, but this time it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of someone measuring a step they're about to take. Grandma, he said finally, do you think I could actually make something of this? That I could belong in a place like that arts program? The question reminded me of a time he was 6, standing on the edge of the high diving board at the local pool. His skinny legs shook, his hands gripped the rail, and he shouted down, Grandma, what if I can't? I had cupped my hands and called back, then the water will still catch you. That's the promise. He had jumped, water spraying up like applause, and when he came up laughing, I thought my chest would burst with relief. So I answered him the same way now, years later. The program isn't a gate with a lock, sweetheart. It's a pool. You'll only know the water if you jump. His breath hitched, half fear, half hope. And if Dad, he didn't finish. I'll talk to your father, I said. Not to fight your battles, but to remind him of mine. He forgets sometimes that mistakes built the person he leans on. He chuckled at that, but it carried warmth. You always have a way of saying things. That afternoon, I sat at my desk and pulled open an old drawer. Inside were letters, photographs, and scraps of fabric I'd saved from other seasons of my life. I chose a postcard of Van Gogh's The Night Café. Its colors restless and alive, and I slipped it into an envelope. I wrote, Art is not about answers. It's about questions that won't leave you alone. If those questions are calling you, follow them. I sealed the envelope, added a little cash for new sketch pencils, and walked it to the post office. As I slid it into the outgoing slot, I felt the same small thrill as when I used to mail him birthday cards with stickers tucked inside. This time, though, it wasn't just a gift. It was a quiet push at his back, a reminder that the world opens for those who dare to hold their breath and leap. That night, when I crawled into bed, the rain had stopped, and the sky stretched clear and star-dusted. My phone sat silent on the nightstand, but in my heart I could already hear his voice calling again, carrying not just questions, but maybe, soon, the beginnings of answers. The following evening, just as I was rinsing dishes and stacking them in the rack, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't midnight, but just after sunset, when the sky still held a soft trace of pink and the cicadas hummed outside my kitchen window. I dried my hands on a towel and answered, already expecting his voice. "Grandma," he said, a little breathless, "I did it. I told Dad." I pulled out a chair and sat down, steadying myself. The refrigerator clicked off, leaving the house unusually still. "And?" I asked gently. There was a pause. I could almost see him running a hand through his hair, the way he does when searching for the right words. He didn't take it well. He said art isn't a career, it's a hobby. That I'd be wasting my time and his money. He thinks I'm chasing something childish. "Grandma," I tried to explain, but he wouldn't hear me. The ache in his voice carried across the line, heavy and raw. My son, his father, had always been practical, grounded in hard work and clear goals. I loved that about him, but sometimes it left no space for dreams that didn't have ladders or paychecks attached. "What did you say back?" I asked. I told him this was the only thing that makes me feel alive. But when I said that, he just got quiet. And then he left the room. His voice cracked then, just slightly, but enough to pull at my chest. What if he never understands? I let silence rest between us for a moment, not to avoid the question, but to honor it. Through the window, a breeze carried the smell of damp grass. I thought about the years I spent trying to prove myself to people who had already made up their minds, and I remembered something my own grandmother once told me. Some people won't recognize your song, but that doesn't mean you stop singing. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "your father's silence isn't the end of the story. It's just a chapter he hasn't finished reading yet. Give him time. In the meantime, you don't need his understanding to hold a pencil." He didn't answer right away. I heard him shift, the scrape of a chair leg against the floor. "I sketched after he left," he admitted. "It helped. I drew his face, Grandma. Not angry, just tired. And then I drew myself beside him, holding something he couldn't quite see." "That's brave," I told him. "Turning hurt into lines and shadows instead of letting it bury you. That's what artists do. They take what could crush them and make it into something that breathes." For the first time that night, he laughed, though it carried a fragile edge. "You always make it sound like I'm stronger than I feel." "That's because I've lived long enough to know that feelings are weather. They change, but the ground beneath them stays." He sighed. "You know what's strange? Even after the argument, even after all of it, I still feel certain. Like I can't turn back now, even if it means losing his approval." I pressed the phone closer to my ear, wishing I could reach through and rest my hand on his shoulder. "Certainty is rare," I said. "If you feel it now, hold it close. It will carry you when other voices try to push you off the path." The line went quiet again, but this time it was the kind of silence filled with thought, not despair. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the worn wallpaper in my kitchen, and realized how many times life had circled back to the same truth, that love sometimes looks like letting go, trusting someone to find their own way through the dark. "Grandma." His voice broke the quiet. "Yes, love. Thank you for not laughing at me, for not telling me to be practical." I closed my eyes. There will be enough people in this world who do that. My job is to be the one who reminds you that your heart is not foolish. It's a compass. When we said goodnight, I lingered at the table, listening to the cicadas and the faint hum of traffic on the distant highway. I thought of my son, his rigid sense of duty, and my grandson, trembling on the edge of his own beginning. Between them was a chasm of misunderstanding, and I wondered if I could be the bridge. Before bed, I took out my journal. I wrote down everything he'd told me, word for word as best as I could remember. I sketched the bus stop drawing in simple lines, just so I could hold it in my own hands. And then I wrote a single sentence beneath it. Dreams are not childish. They are seeds. As I set the pen down, I felt tears rise again, but this time they were mixed with pride. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just waiting for his call. I was waiting for his future, too, even if it took the long way around. A week passed before his next call came, and in that time I caught myself checking the phone more often than usual, like a gardener watching the sky for rain. When it finally rang, it was late evening again. I was sitting in the living room with the lamp glowing softly beside me, a half-finished knitting project draped across my lap. The sound startled me, but the moment I saw his name flash on the screen, my heart steadied. "Grandma," he said, and this time his voice was lighter, like a window had been opened. "You won't believe what happened today." I leaned forward, knitting slipping from my lap onto the rug. "Tell me," I said, already smiling. "I took my sketchbook downtown," he began. I sat on a bench outside the cafe after my shift, and I just started drawing. People walking by, the way the light hit the storefronts, even an old man feeding pigeons. A woman stopped, watched me for a while, and then asked if she could buy one of my sketches. Grandma, she actually paid me for it. His voice cracked with disbelief, but underneath it was something new, something proud. I didn't even know what to say. I just tore the page out and gave it to her. I felt tears blur my sight again, but these were different. They weren't from worry or fear. They were the kind that come when you glimpse the first green shoot breaking through the soil. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, my voice trembling, "that's your first step into the world. Do you realize what that means?" "I think so," he replied. "It means maybe this isn't just a dream. Maybe I can make it real." The joy in his words filled my living room, spilling into every corner like sunlight. But then his voice softened. "I still haven't told Dad about it. He barely looks at me these days. It's like there's this wall I can't get through." I breathed slowly, steadying myself. "Walls don't always need to be broken down," I said. "Sometimes they crumble when you build a door. And sometimes you have to show someone what you see before they can understand." There was a pause, and then he asked, "Would you come with me?" When I talk to him again, I know it's my decision, but maybe if you're there, you'll listen. My throat tightened. My son and I had weathered our share of storms, and I knew this conversation would not be easy. But for my grandson, for the light in his voice tonight, I would walk into any storm. "Of course I'll come," I said softly. 2 nights later, I found myself sitting at my son's dining table. The old clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, and the air carried that mix of roasted coffee and floor polish I remembered from years back. My grandson sat across from me, his sketchbook in hand, while my son's jaw was set, his arms folded. "Dad," my grandson began, his voice shaking but steady enough to carry, "I know you think this is a mistake, but look." He opened his book, page after page of faces and streets, and fleeting moments captured in graphite and ink. "This is what I see when I walk through the world. This is who I am when I put a pencil in my hand. I can't ignore it anymore." My son glanced, reluctant at first, but as the pages turned, his eyes softened just slightly. I watched him the way only a mother can, saw the tug-of-war inside him between pride and fear. Finally, I spoke. "You raised a boy with courage enough to speak his truth. That's no failure, no matter what path he takes. Let him try. If he falls, we'll help him stand. But don't let him spend his life wondering what might have grown if he planted the seed." The room was quiet, heavy with old habits and unspoken love. Then, slowly, my son exhaled. "I don't understand it," he admitted, voice low. But maybe I don't have to. Maybe it's enough that you do. My grandson's eyes shone, and for the first time in weeks, his shoulders dropped, his breath eased. He looked at me, gratitude written clear across his face, and in that moment I knew the midnight call had carried us all here, through fear, through tears, into this fragile but hopeful space. That night, as I walked home under the stars, the world felt hushed and wide open. The air was cool, carrying the scent of late-blooming jasmine. I thought about how one phone call, trembling and uncertain, had blossomed into this turning point. Life, I realized, isn't measured only in milestones, but in the courage it takes to answer the phone when it rings at midnight, and to keep listening long after. When I climbed into bed, I whispered a thank you into the quiet room. Not just for my grandson's courage, but for the reminder that love, when spoken aloud, can reshape the very air we breathe. And I fell asleep with the certainty that whatever came next, he would not face it alone.